Greeting, friends. I'm so happy to talk to you again, especially because we are prepared for you a very special treat. Every time it is something very special, but today is really something very, very, very special. It is said that in our human history, there is no person who is not influenced by the existence, by the phenomenon of the Divine Comedy by La Divina Comedia by Dante Alighieri, even if that person didn't read a single line from that great book. And that is true, you will see it. I am one of the examples, not completely 100% examples, but however, when I was a young girl, I opened the great book and tried to start reading it. It was a hard undertaking, but I was just struck, absolutely stunned by the beginning of Comedia. I learned first 27 lines of that Russian translation, very beautiful one, by heart, and carried it with me all my life. Until recently, because I started reading it, rereading it, really, truly, with full dedication. Especially because now I know that century after century, there is no good artist to be found who wouldn't try their vision and their artistic mind and their artistic skill on La Divina Comedia. So, just to start, I want to read you a few lines from the English translation of that great book. I downloaded it from the so-called Gutenberg project, Longfellow translation. Listen, midway upon the journey our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. Ah me, how hard a thing it is to say what was the first savage rough and stern, which in the very thought renews the fear. And so we go. What we see on this first slide, we see the portrait of Dante Alighieri, created by his friend Giotto, the great artist Giotto. They met, they became friends in the beginning of 14th century where they lived. And this portrait was created in 1345, in 1335, I'm sorry. After Dante passed already. This portrait can be found on the fresco in the Podesta chapel in the Palazzo del Bargello. The first fresco, the first picture that we have seen in the beginning, I want to get back to it, to return it to this picture, because I wanna to tell you that it was created a century after that, in 1465, by Domenico de Michelino, with the full picture of what was happening in the great book, with Dante holding the book open, with the gates of Inferno open, with the mountain of purgatory, with the havens of paradise, and with the following inscription. It's English translation. Who sang of heaven and of the regions twain, midway and in the abyss where souls are judged, surveying all in spirit. Here and he is here, Dante, our master poet. Florence found of times in him a father wise and strong in his devotion. Death could bring no harm to such a bard. For him true life have gained his worth, his verse, and this is his FG. So how Florence dedicated his fresco, his spirit, to his memory. Those who were traveled to Italy, to Florence, probably could see that tempera panel in the Santa Maria del Fiore. And now let's get back to the portrait created by Giotto. They were friends, as I said, and they valued their talents. Dante even mentioned Giotto in his Comedia with the following words. In painting, Cimabue thought he held the field, and now it's Giotto that they acclaim. The former only keeps a shadow fame. Dante considered Giotto as the artist who revolutionized the painting on 14th century. And it is commonly considered that both Dante and his friend Giotto, each one in their own field, brought the art of the word and their art of the image to vernacular of the common people. So we have it. And Dante was born in the end of 13th century in 1265, and he just kept living his life, first studying law and medicine, then participating in the wars between Guelphs and Ghibellines, because his family belonged to the Guelphs. And he even kept relatively higher posts in the structure of Guelphs Florence. And then they lost. They lost, and through the political games, as we all know, things can turn very badly. Dante was wrongly blamed for bad things, and with the threat of his life, he went to exile. His exile started in 1302. In 1303, he left politics. He lived here and there around Italy, in different cities, in different places. And while keeping the memory of his beloved Beatrice, whom he met when both of them were children of 9-year-old in 1275, and whom he met only one time after that, and whom he loved dearly all his life. And after Beatrice's untimely death, when she was only 25, Dante decided that he would create some book, something to immortalize the memory of his beloved Beatrice. So in 1307, Dante started his work on his Comedia, because he himself called it Comedia. Only later, in, I believe, 1316, his book, Life of Dante Alighieri, Boccaccio added the term La Divina to the Comedia. And since then, we know that book under this name, The Divine Comedy. Through his travels, Dante obtained friends and enemies. One of his friends was the ruler of Verona, by the way, Ghibellin della Scala, who supported him, who was his first reader of everything that Dante was writing in his great creation. However, starting from 1314 until his death in 1321, Dante spent most of his life in the monastery Santa Croce di Fonte, where he kept working on the Divine Comedy. It is said, it is mentioned that he barely could not even fully finish it. However, we have the great book in the, I don't know how to call it, not in the possession, in the soul of the humanity. It is where the book belongs. In somewhat hundred of years, in Florence, another great artist, now the artist who worked in the field of art, Botticelli, Sandro Botticelli, was commissioned by the ruler of Florence and great patron of arts, Lorenzo Medici, to create manuscript with the illustrations of the Comedia, of the Divine Comedy. I wanted you to see not only the portrait of Dante that Botticelli created within that commission on parchment, because though in this time printed books started appear, but manuscript, especially by collectors, by people who could afford commissioning this very expensive piece of art and literature, manuscript, they kept commissioning manuscripts. So Botticelli was commissioned to create that manuscript. This is the portrait that he created for that manuscript. This is Botticelli, because through this program, I made sure that you can see not only their creations of different artists whom I've chosen for this presentation, but also their portraits, because I believe that it is very important that we can look into the eyes on those great artists, because through their eyes we see what Dante created for us. So Botticelli, this portrait is taken from that fresco. See, it is his figure. It is his self-portrait, of course. Mostly I tried to collect self-portraits for that presentation by the artist who created illustrations or pictures related to the Divine Comedy. Next slide will show us several paintings that Botticelli created throughout this commission. Probably he kept working on that commission for a number of years. Some observers think that possibly until the death of his patron, Lorenzo Medici, which happened in the beginning of next century, in 05, I think. Yes, in 1505. Sandro Botticelli started working on that commission approximately in 1480. He created that portrait of Dante that you've seen already. And then he created so-called maps of Inferno. See, those pieces were painted because generally speaking, the stages of Botticelli's work on the pictures for the Comedia were the following. First, the drawings would be created by the metal stylus. Then it was treated by pen and ink, and then color would go into play. But at some point, some art critics, some art observers came to the assumption, both artist and patron decided that Botticelli's drawings did not need to be developed more than they were at that stage that you would see they stayed. And to our time, they came, or the reproductions of them, they came relatively light. But however, this work by Sandro Botticelli is considered as one of his one of the most central work, if the body of his work, and it is even compared with his famous Primavera, the work that we all know. Let us see what we have in our next slide. You see, it is exactly what we were talking about. Some pages look as if they were left at this particular stage. Some of them would be created on the double page of parchment. The whole manuscript was done on parchment yet. Some of them treated with some pen and ink, some of them left untreated, still absolutely beautiful. I would not be bothering you with art critical analysis of the pictures, because it's not for that purpose I've collected that little collection of that presentation, but mostly for pleasure of seeing the creation of Dante through the eyes of art of great artists. So, Lucifer and towering figures and some other picture. And next slide will show you the appearance of Beatrice, and then some scenes from Paradise when Beatrice is showing the way, helping Dante, whom she's guiding in Paradise to get to the highest levels of his travel throughout the knowledge of the wisdom that he has obtained by the end of his journey. You know, of course, that even the name Beatrice has some kind of incantation of beatific love. And not only the image of the beloved lady of courtly love, but also the symbol of the heavenly wisdom, of divine revelation, of contemplation and grace. It is what she presents through the whole poem and through the masterpieces created by Sandro Botticelli. Meanwhile, still in the 15th century, people kept creating manuscripts dedicated to the great book. that is one manuscript. It is named. Let me. It is named. It is named by Alfonso's manuscript. This one is created by the artist Giovanni de Paolo, and it depicts the Canto of Paradise. It is said even there, Dante and Beatrice meet 12 wise men in the sphere of the sun. And to prove you that influence of the great poem could not, cannot, will not be underestimated through the history of culture of humankind, I want to show you that detail of the fresco of the Last Judgment created by great Michelangelo, the Sistine Chapel. And the fresco is created in 1536, 41, something like that. And it shows, so in the middle of 16th century already, it shows the exact depiction of the scene described by Dante in the Inferno, where he and his guide Virgilius see the Charon, who is delivering the souls of departed right to hell. It is his figure, it is his stick that he is pinching and pushing and rushing his passengers to his boat. Very scary. It is Michelangelo, and it is how he sees Dante's The Divine Comedy. And now we are approaching the body of artwork by another great artist. We are just jumping through a few centuries. Now we are in 1850 in France. We are very successful, very famous, and very well-to-do artist, Gustave Doré, decided to create the series of illustrations for the masterpieces of literature. And what is included in that list? It is Homer, Ossian, Byron, Goethe, Racine, Cornell, and the first name in the list is Dante Alighieri's La Divina Comedia. So in 1855, he started working. He created first, I believe, kind of 100 wood engraving. And he couldn't find the publisher for this first collection of his illustrations to Inferno. He published them himself. The success was so overwhelming that his next sets of illustrations to Divine Comedy, Purgatory, and Paradise were published immediately, and since then about 200 editions were published with his depiction of the Divina, of the La Divina Comedia, and now commonly accepted that when somebody mentions the imagery of the Divine Comedy, the illustrations by Gustave Doré come to your mind. It is how that French great artist presented Dante. Dante has that lore on his head. He always wanted to have it in his life. He didn't have it, he didn't get it. But all the artists creating his portraits, especially after his passing, would crown him with that laureatic crown. And this is the self-portrait of Gustave Doré. I want you to look into the eyes of the artist. The eyes of the artist show you not only what the artist sees in the mirror when artist depicts himself. It gives you some glimpse of how the artist is going to look into art and how this artist is going to present the subject of his work to us. Let's look at it. This is Inferno, of course. I would give you a chance just to look at it. This is the limbo where the great poets are spending the eternity, because by the Dante's conception, they are not sinned, they are not, but they cannot go into paradise because they are so-called pagans. So they are there. And these are punishments for many sins that Dante mentions in his great work. Those who read it could recognize those scenes. Farinata is talking to Dante and Virgilius, who is helping Dante through the Inferno and Purgatory. You know that Dante would be taken by Beatrice at the border between Purgatory and Paradise, because Paradiso, because Virgilius is not allowed to step into Paradise. So regretfully, because Dante considered him the great of the greatest of the poets of the history of poetry that humankind created, though he lived even the century before our time, so to speak, BC. The devil spirits over there, over the heads of Dante and Virgilius. Here we have them again. Here the Antaeus giant is helping both of them to get to the very bottom of the Inferno. And this is, as you see, Luciferus. And here we have the gates that both of our travelers have to pass. And now, by traveling through Gustave Doré set of engravings, we, though those are fallen angels, whom Dante intricately didn't allow even to get into the Inferno because it would be too much of reward to their rebellion. However, now we are approaching the Paradise. And here Dante is talking to his ancestor, who is asking him what would be the life after his passing, who is predicting Dante his life, and his guide, his patron in the travel around Paradise is Beatrice. Just enjoy it. I wouldn't talk because sometimes to enjoy art in full, you just have to eliminate the unnecessary sound. Art talks for itself. That is so-called white rose, the end of trouble. I probably will recite you the end of the poem depicting that, close to that scene, but just look at it in the eyes of Gustave Doré. And now we are meeting another artist, Englishman, William Blake. William Blake, though he lived a little bit earlier than Gustave Doré, he was born in 1757 and lived until 1827. So he created his commentary, his interpretation, visual interpretation of the La Divina Comedia even earlier than Doré decided to start his work. But I purposely decided on that order of things. You will see why. Because the placement, the position of the artist, poet, theologian, thinker, and strange man, William Blake, is very special in the history of literature, visual art, and even social movements, if you believe so. So, let's get back to the artwork. It is how William Blake, who was commissioned by the very end of his life, after he has created plenitude of paintings, drawings, his own texts, and published his own books illustrated by himself, and illustrated other people's books very heavily. And he invented and created, using that invention, his own style in making the pictures. I will tell you a few words about it. However, in 1826, he was commissioned by his young friend Linnell to create the illustrations, the pictures. I would prefer to call them pictures, because illustrations for the artist like Blake, it is not exactly right. It is rather his commentary on the phenomenon that he is responding to by the phenomenon of his art. So he started, however, his work and worked non-stop without any, I believe, any minute, any second of doing something else, because he was already not well. And he passed in less than a year. He worked only for 7 months on that commission, on the set of drawings, 102 plates he created, 102 pieces he created. And it is said that he literally worked on his dying bed. But before we go further, first take a look at the portrait of Dante that William Blake has created, and his self-portrait. Interesting thing about this portrait is that William Blake created not only his self-portrait at the moment of creation, that portrait, but also himself in his younger years when he was 28. He didn't change much, a little bit less hair, but it doesn't matter. The eyes, the look, the dedication, maybe the concentration is more powerful when he got a little bit more mature. Let's go and see what he offers us. It is the entering the forest, the scenes of Inferno. These are watercolors. Sometimes William Blake would create the lining print. It could be lithograph, it could be even etching, and then he would paint over it. But it is said that those pictures are created as watercolors, It is considered that Blake was an admirer of Michelangelo, and you can see it. He is called the founding father, maybe, or the foundation of romanticism in the visual art, and you can see it as well. And the passion and the dedication is so great that when we see that in Blake's opinion, when he created those images, he was in the contact with the some higher powers, allowing him to deliver what he was delivering through his art. And honestly, every single good artist is in the contact with some powers that allow this artist to deliver to us highly spirited, uplifting, even if it depicts those horrible scenes, uplifting our souls. So that was considered by William Blake himself. These horrible scenes of Pope getting into the boiling pot. This is the symbolic figure of the humankind, as Dante and Blake shared his belief, as humankind behaved badly through the history of the deeds. That's why the humankind has the crown of gold and the body of silver, and then bronze, and then clay feet, clay legs and clay feet. So both of them were afraid that eventually everything would be crushed if humankind didn't change his attitudes and his behaviors. I think that we can say that we could agree with them right now. Other sinners depicted by Blake. And I really think that the pictures are so beautiful that sometimes you think, is the scene is so beautiful that the artist can be inspired to create such a beauty, thinking about all these bad behaviors that humankind was coming through. And you can see it all. It is known that Blake's artworks were not recognized right the way after they were created. Maybe that's why it was right for me to place them after Doré's illustration, because it took a prayerful lights to discover and to get inspired by creations of Blake. And the 20th century movement of flower power was inspired by Blake's creations in all many fields of his work. Writing, visual art, definitely, definitely. And here we have another scene of Antheus helping those two to get to the bottom of the inferno. And the fire wall, fire circle, fire sphere. And Dante and Beatrice. Now Beatrice is taking him under her protection because Virgilius couldn't do it, as we said, as we knew. And here they are in paradise. Yeah. Before we get further, I want to tell you that I do see the connection between these two artists. That's why I decided to put them one after another. Look at the face of that young man. Of course, you understand whom we are talking about. You see this mustache. Of course, it is Salvador Dali, of course. But if you look without any prejudice into his eyes, and if you look just putting aside all the common knowledge of what he was doing outside of making art and inside of making art in his first years, in the years which brought him to fame. If you look in his face, he was 20 years old when he created that self-portrait, named the self-portrait with Raphaelesque neck. It is known that Salvatore Dali was admirer of Raphael, and I'll further let you know whom he come to admire later in his lifetime in art. So in the middle of 20th century, of course, Dali got a very interesting commission in 1957. He was commissioned by Italian government to create the set of the illustrations to La Divina Comedia, which would to be done by the 700th anniversary to Dante's birthday, a little present to the baby born 700 years ago, Dante Alighieri. And of course, Dali started working on that commission, and then an interesting thing happened, and you'll find it very telling about humankind. Sometimes I think that nothing is changing in our life in terms of our sins and silliness. It was an outcry in Italy why a Spaniard, Dali, got this commission, not an Italian artist, if you believe it. So the commission was pulled off. But Dali, being already very well standing, he was in a very good standing by this time, in spite of all the difficulties that he needed to endure, owing to his own wrongs, owing to the wrongs of other people. However, he was all good on his feet at the moment, and he kept working on that set of works. He created 120 plates for La Divina Comedia, and he found two engravers who would be creating, and they did create 350 wooden plates, wooden blocks for reproductions of his watercolors, because the medium that Salvatore Dali had chosen for that work was watercolor. Now look at the portrait of Dante that Dali created within this work. I keep the pattern, presenting you the portrait of Dante created by the artist chosen to be seen within our collection, and his self-portrait. Dali, Dante, and let's go next. Yeah. Now, those of you who know all these surrealistic pictures by Dali, and we all know them. You say Dali, and immediately those melting watches and elephants and all these horrible things are coming to our mind. But Dali was not only well academically trained, he was really a very good artist with a great sense of space. Look at this picture. Here we see Dante approaching the beginning of his journey. Look at the space and feel it. I won't say a word for a few minutes. Some scenes from Inferno, of course, and each of those pictures, they present you the richness of the technique, though it is watercolor. But watercolor, as we know so very well, is a very rich material. Those of you who tried your hands on watercolor know that watercolor, as friendly as it is, as capricious as it is, can allow you to do just almost everything that you need to do. It can give you lightness, it can give you heaviness, it can give you manipulation of the line and the spot. It can give you whatever you want to have. And Dali took it. I decided to put here, though it is not exactly in the order of the travel of Dante and Virgilius, I decided to put here the depiction of the Haron vessel boat here, because by the lightness of the touch of the brush, it goes so well with the scenes from Purgatory. I truly enjoy it. Being honest with you, I'm not an admirer of the heavy surrealism by Dali, but I love the artistry and I love those pictures. The lightness, the mastership, the, how to say it, the uplifting spirit of real art is so invaluable that you can forget everything which is unnecessary even to mention here, like funny mustaches. And here we have some scenes from Purgatory and from the beginning of Paradise. This scene is actually taken from the portion of the La Divina Comedia from Inferno, when Beatrice is explaining to Virgilius how it would be proceeded when Virgilius would help Dante to come through Inferno and Purgatory, and Bice would take over and take care of the traveler in Paradise. but I think that it fits to this slide so well. And I know for sure that everything when Dali depicts the beautiful lady, like here and here, you can be guaranteed that it is his beloved Gala, his muse and his wife, Gala. It is her. I bet it is her. And just keep in mind that in this point, those things, Beatrice divine, love, and heavenly wisdom, and human love, somehow they come to one point. Just think about it. Art helps us. Art helps us to think about it. And here we are in paradise by Dali. I'm finishing the set of Dali with this figure. I think that figure presents the image of the book rather than some certain topic, certain canto, certain chapter. It is just the image of a human being looking at the world, trying to capture what is the place of the humanity in the universum. Dante looked through it, through the whole Divine Comedy. Gustave Doré looked through it. Blake absolutely, definitely did. And Dali did. And Dali did. By the way, by the end of his, not by the end, the second part of his career, when he was in America several times and with his shows and his performances and everything, he came to be more academical, and he came to admire not only Raphael, but de Kooning. You know who de Kooning is. Very interesting. You can find the divine into real art, whatever form it obtains. It just has to be real. Now we get to completely different story. I don't know if you know the name of that artist. I think yes, because it is a very good American artist, Leonard Baskin. Leonard Baskin is from our Massachusetts. He worked and lived here, I believe, almost all his life in different places. His brother was rabbi, but he was not. But he was very deeply involved in thinking about all big problems of human existence, of religion, of many things. Though he lived in the time when Boston and Massachusetts became the land of the birth of the abstract expressionism, Leonard Baskin was not interested in it, because what he was writing in one of his publications, I will read it for you. The human figure is the image of all men and of one man. It contains all and can express all. So for Leonard Baskin, it was very important to operate with the images of human figures, not only human figures. His art was figurative art. So this is him. Look into his face, look into his eyes. Of course, sarcasm and skepticism should be part of the vision of the artist who observes the life and accomplishments or unaccomplishments of human race and depicts the visualizations of all that through the eyes of the artist. He looked into the same approach of Dante Alighieri. It's probably we allowed to assume that all these artists whom we just looked at their art, they shared the vision of Dante Alighieri of the humankind, of the place of the humankind in the universe, and other circumstances of existence of life. So it is how Leonard Baskin depicts Dante Alighieri in the Purgatory book. This is how he depicts him in the Book of Inferno. Baskin received the commission. He accomplished 120 big pictures, drawings / watercolors in 1968. It's very telling that those artists who came to be chosen into this collection, except Dore, were choosing the medium of watercolor very often in working onto this on this topic, on this theme of Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy. Let's see a few pictures that Leonard Baskin created for that. The head of the Medusa, Harpy. These horrible images from Inferno. Really horrible from one side. From the other side, they are very convincing because they are done with not only dedication to the purpose of that work, but also with the highest artistry. Enjoy it. Look at the lines. Look at the combination of single simple line and the area painted. In this horrible, truly horrible picture, I have to make myself to include that picture into the collection because it's really awful, but it is at the same time very beautiful. All right, so these are the devils, of course, with the sticks. The depiction of one of the popes that Dante puts into the Inferno. He puts into the Inferno, as you know, not only those of his enemies or bad people who already passed into the other world, but sometimes even people who were alive on Earth at the time of his travel into the underworld and into the upper world, within his Comedia. Somehow, Leonard Baskin considered that picture as a title page for Paradise. Look at it and think about it. If such an artist of such a deep thought through the eyes of through the mind of an artist, through the eyes of an artist, with such a skill that Baskin possesses, if he decided to make the title page for Paradiso of that kind, it means something. Let us think about it. No words from me. The artist will talk. And this is the dove, which is completely appropriate when we think about Paradiso. And now I want to show you what is happening now, today, with the interpretation of the great book. That is how Seymour Quast sees the whole book. This is how another artist of today sees the map of the Inferno. And of course, you can see that these are examples of how comics art interprets the Divine Comedy with all the thoughts. Should I inhale, breathe but find no exit? Asks poor Dante. This is called Beatrice. And one more slide I'm gonna show you. And in this slide, you will see the painting created in 1530. Yes, I'm not mistaken. It is created in 1530 by the Italian painter Bronzino, presenting Dante with his laurel crown and with his book open and with the Mount of Purgatory and with all the things, with the waters, the forest, and the mysterious figures behind him. And what the artist of real today, not like 20 years ago, because Leonard Baskin, unfortunately for all of us, passed 20 years ago in 2000. This is the artist of today, Lorenzo Mattotti. And it is how he creates his vision of what Dante's book is explaining to him. I thought that those, and these two works also belong to Lorenzo Mattotti, about Inferno, both of them. Another Farinata piece, another devils pushing the sinners back into the torture. I just think that the timeless significance of the concept that created for us by Dante Alighieri immortalizing his concept and his vision of the place of human goodness, which is embodied into the love to wisdom, to person, to knowledge, because it is what he has experienced through his travel, through his book. And it is what artists who take on the challenge of visual commentary of the great book, what they experience. Now, what would be the final touch for this presentation? I was thinking about it and I found the following. Yeah. Dali's piece, which depicts Beatrice, who helps Dante not only to finalize his travel, but also the Beatrice, the divine wisdom, and the wisdom of love for everything and for existence and of existence. And of course, it is the portrait of his gala, of course, that you understand. It is what would be a perfect picture to finish that talk. But then I thought a little bit more and I added that picture. That picture depicts the drawing, the portrait of another lady, another woman, artist and poet herself. Her name was Lizzie Sidal. And when you go to whatever research you want to do in visual art and ask for visual presentation of Beatrice, you'll find her portrait not in that drawing, but by the painting, in the painting of Dante Gabrieli Rossetti, which is called Beata Beatrix, which presents the portrait of that lady, artist and poet. She was not only the painter and the poet, she was a famous model of pre-Raphaelites. And I thought that to put together the image of the divine beauty of love and the image of the divine beauty of creative process, because here she is presented as an artist, as creator, somehow pays tribute to the whole depth of the La Divina Comedia, who we all can dive deep, 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 never reaching the bottom of it, because there is no bottom in the universe of human thought, and there is no bottom in the universe that we live. And with that, I will read you a little piece of the very end of the Longfellow translation of La Divina Comedia. The Dante is crying out and he receives the help, of course, of his Beatrice. O light eternal, soul in thyself that dwellest, soul knoweth thyself, and know unto thyself, and knowing lovest and smilest on thyself. And he's trying, the traveler is trying to get to the point of that shining center of everything that he tries to get. And then the very end of the whole story is the following. Here we go filled the lofty fantasy. But now was turning my desire and will, even as a will that equally is moved. The love which moves the sun and the other stars. Just remember that true love has many faces. And one of the most beautiful faces of love is art. Just enjoy it. Thank you very much. And I will see you next time.